Guys, today we're going to take a look at creating some different piano accompaniment patterns using Joni Mitchell's The Circle Game. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you some really basic combinations of patterns that you can play with the right hand and the left hand, and then we'll practice it with a verse, and I'm going to build on it. So fundamentally, when we play at the piano, we've got a few different options. We can play for the right hand. A lot of times we can do block chords. So if I'm playing in C, I could try C, F, G, and C. I could play arpeggios, broken chords that could go up or down or both. And in the left hand at its simplest, a lot of times it can play just single bass notes. So I could do C, F, and G. Or if you want something a little bit more interesting, you can do fifths. So I could play C and G, F and C, G and D, and back to C. So by combining these block patterns, single notes, arpeggios, we can create some different textures at the piano. So here's a really basic one. It's just keeping a pulse. So I'm going to keep a pulse in half notes. You'll notice that initially I'm going to do the chord in root position. So you're going to see my hand hopping around. And the left hand, I'm going to do single notes at first, and then later I'll do some fifths. So let's hear part of this verse here. Yesterday, a child came out to wander, caught a dragonfly inside a jar. Fearful when the sky was full of thunder, and tearful at the falling of the star. So if you go back and watch, you'll notice there's certain points where I played just single bass notes, and sometimes I did fifths. Oftentimes it's really helpful to switch back and forth. When the chords change quickly, a lot of times I'll switch back to using just single bass notes because it's a little simpler. Now let's try and see what it sounds like if I add a little bit different rhythm on top of that, still keeping a pulse. So instead of doing half notes with the right hand, I'm going to do quarter notes. And just to give us a little bit more of a rock bass line, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, So you can do this again with one single bass note, or you can switch between your notes in your fifth. So let's hear what that sounds like. Yesterday, a child came out to wander, caught a dragonfly inside a jar. Fearful when the sky was full of thunder, and tearful at the falling of the star. So it just gives us a little bit more motion in that. Another thing that you can do, let's stick with using sort of those quarter notes. We're going to switch now to an arpeggio. So just going up and down in quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to keep the left hand really simple and just play again those single bass notes or fifths, switching back and forth. So let's hear what that sounds like. Yesterday, a child came out to wander, caught a dragonfly inside a jar. Fearful when the sky was full of thunder, and tearful at the falling demonstration there of how you can use mostly root position chords. You'll notice in my right hand, I'm not using very many inversions yet. So letting that right hand hop to the next triad. Another thing to point out too, so one of these chords, the G7 chord, actually has 4 notes in it. We have G, B, D, and F. So one way that makes this really simple to split between the hands, if you'll look here, if we start on the 3rd of the chord, do you see how I still have my really nice skipping shape here? So I can let my left hand take care of the root of the chord, the G, and then cover the remaining three notes, B, D, F, in the right hand. So that happened at jar. I'll show you that part. But notice how, again, I'm just covering those 3 notes, letting my left hand take care of the root. Caught a dragonfly inside a jar. You're also welcome, as you're just holding these. A lot of times I'm using whole notes, but if you want to repeat a note, that's okay too. It could, I did that a little bit. I'll try it again. So, yesterday a child came out to wander, caught a dragonfly inside a jar. Fearful when the sky was full of thunder, and tearful at the falling of the star. You'll also notice there at the end of the verse where the chords are a little bit faster, I chose to switch to a different texture. So I left the arpeggio pattern and went back to block chords. So these ingredients, you're allowed to switch between them in the phrases. Let's take a look at something a little bit more complex for those of you that want to challenge. So we've talked a lot about having the single bass note. We've talked about the 5th. So another texture that's really common in piano music is the root 5th root. So you have to open up the hand and you're playing the root. So in C, that would be C for the C chord, the 5th, G in the C chord, and then the root again on top. So what you'll notice is that your pinky and your thumb is covering the span of an octave, and you've got this nice 5th in between. So this root 5th root, again, when you're doing an arpeggio, usually it goes up. So we hear that nice bass note first. And sometimes that's it. Sometimes it can go up and down. Sometimes they'll save just the lowest note for sort of the downbeat, and they'll oscillate between these 2 notes, the 5th and the root on top. So it'll sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and up and down would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So I'm going to show you how you can use the root 5th root a little bit in your arpeggios. So let's do something really. And I will also show you how you can position your right hand to make a really nice sort of rising arpeggio line. So let's say we're using our C major chord. If you set up your root 5th root, then the right hand can actually play what would be a first inversion chord, E, G, C. And if you look in the middle here, what's really easy to spot when you're playing this pattern is this relationship, because you've got the skips, right? Thumb and then skip for the next thumb, and then second finger is on the next skip. So look for that root position chord in the middle between both hands. And then you can really move that around easily. So here's your C. Notice how I've got that root 5th root, and then my first inversion chord. If I move to the F, I'm going to move down. Notice again how my thumbs are that skip apart. So I have root 5th root and my inversion, and then your G chord. In this case, you've got G if you use the G on top, or you can switch and use that F. So you have your G7, your 5/7 chord. So you'd have root 5th roots. And there's the rest of that chord, which is what we did before. We let the left hand take care of the root of the chord, and we use the right hand to cover the remaining 3 notes. So here's an example of a pattern that you could use with that sort of shape. I'm just going to do 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. So notice how I'm just keeping a really regular rhythm, and it's just going up. And then I can move it to another chord. Okay, so here's what this would sound like on the circle game. Yesterday, a child came out to wander, caught a dragonfly inside a jar. Fearful when the sky was full of thunder, and tearful at the falling of the star. And you can see there again at the very end of the verse, I broke away from that pattern because the chords are changing a little bit more quickly. Another thing you can do with that fifth root pattern, if you want to let it take care of most of the flowing motion, you can just do a nice block chord on top of it and still in the same shape. So your hands can be in the same position, but just let the right hand play a block and let the left hand do running eighth notes. So you can do 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then play your block chord on top. So let's hear what that sounds like on here. Yesterday, a child came out to wander, caught a dragonfly inside a jar. Fearful when the sky was full of thunder, and tearful at the falling of the star. So you'll notice sometimes I kept that shape again where the hands are moving real close to each other, keeping that same form. And then sometimes I let the right hand pick a different inversion so it didn't have to jump. So for example, going from that C chord to the F, I just kept my F chord in root position here in the right hand. So mixing up those chord shapes in a way that is convenient to you and lets you produce the pattern that you want. Let's see. We did the quarter note block. So yeah, now there are ways to with the right hand where inversions come in really handy. So if you're to the point that you're working on inversions, do go ahead and give them a try, whether you're doing your block chords or whether you're doing arpeggios, because they're really helpful to keep the hand sort of in one spot when you want it to. Those inversions are helpful. So now what I'm going to try is just, I'm going to go ahead and do the whole song and combine these different ingredients. So listen at the beginning how I start with just some of these really simple pulses, really simple arpeggios, and listen how in the later verses I start using some of the fifth root shapes. And again, how I can switch between these ingredients anytime that I want. If the chords move a little faster, then sometimes I'll switch to a simpler texture. Here I go. Yesterday, a child came out to wander, caught a dragonfly inside a jar. Fearful seasons, they go round and round, and the painted ponies go up and down. We're captive on a carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came, and go round and round and round in the circle game. Then the child moved 10 times round the seasons, skated over 10 clear frozen streams. Words like, when you're older, masterpieces, and promises of someday make histories. And the seasons, they go round and round, and the painted ponies go up and down. We're captive on a carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came, and go round and round and round in the circle game. Let's see, 16's right. I'll do the root. 16 springs and 16 summers gone now. Cartwheels turn to cartwheels through the town. And they tell him, take your time, it won't be long now, till you drag your feet to slow the circle down. And the seasons, they go round and round, and the painted ponies go up and down. We're captive on the carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came, and go round and round and round in the circle game. Okay. Now on this last verse, I'm just going to do it freely. So we'll see, I'm going to combine any of these ingredients that I like. So you'll see maybe some of the block chords, some of the pulses, some of the root fifths, some of the arpeggios. So I'm just going to freely switch between these textures now. So I'll do the little chorus. And go round and round and round in the circle game. So the years went by, and now the boy is 20. Though his dreams are lost, some grandeur coming true. There'll be new dreams, maybe better dreams, and plenty before the last revolving years through. And the seasons, they go round and round, and the painted ponies go up and down. We're captive on a carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came, and go round and round and round in the circle game. And go round and round and round in the circle game. So there you are. Those are some different ingredients that we'll continue to explore together in your own lychee practice. Enjoy.